Hey, so this is Module 3 of my Building with Terraform course, where I teach you how to use Terraform to build on AWS. So let's go ahead and get into it. So in this video, we're going to go ahead and break down our Terraform code that we have made from the other modules, and we're going to put this into different Terraform file types. Now, you can very well just, have all of everything here, all your Terraform code in one file. But best practice is to break this up. So we're going to go ahead and learn how to do that so we can write better Terraform. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go to Module 3 here. And yeah, so we actually have several different file types for Terraform. We have what's called a provider.tf file. And so this is where we're going to configure our provider, the versions of that provider. We'll learn about Terraform state in a later module, but that's where we would also configure that. And that's really going to be this code up here, all of this provider information. We'll put this into a new file here shortly. You should already be familiar with our main.tf file, which is what we've been using up until this point. So this is where we define the resources that we want to create. So in this case, we've been creating an S3 bucket. Then we have the variables.tf file, and so this is actually where we can replace hard-coded things like, for example, security, dev, or my bucket name. Rather than hard-coding this here, we can go ahead and define this in a variable, and then instead of putting the name here, we can just link the variable. So we'll see how to create that file shortly. And then finally, we have an output.tf file. And so this is where we can specify resource attributes that we want to output. And so those could be a number of things. It could be our bucket name, the bucket ID, etc. So we'll see how to create that file as well. Now, these files, you can change the name. These are just the default names, and keeping it as default is just, it's good because Terraform will know exactly what file to use for what purpose. And then it's also just good if you're working on code with others because they understand, oh, okay, this is the provider file, this is the main.tf file. But these names can change, and that's just something that's just for you to put in the back of your head just to remember. Now let's go ahead and update our Terraform code. So if you need the updated code that I have here, just go ahead and copy this right here, and then you can paste that into your coding editor. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take out the provider information and put that into a new file. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called providers.tf. I'm going to go ahead and cut out the provider information there, save this file, and then paste that into my providers file. Now, just to show you that this is still going to work, we can go ahead and do a Terraform init, and we can see that it is using 5.8.0, which is right here, specified in our providers file, so it's still able to reference this file. And now let's go ahead and make a variables file. So we're going to do variables.tf, and again, just go ahead and copy this code here. We can paste that into our new file. And we'll save that. So let's walk through what this is doing. So I created a variable up here called AWS region. And then we need to, well, we don't have to. We can see that description is optional, but description is going to give us a summary of what this variable is used for. That's really just for us as humans to understand the code better. And then we have to specify a type, and in my case, we're just going to use a string to specify the region. And then here we have another variable for the bucket name. This is just going to be the name of my bucket, and then those tags of security and dev. So I'm going to go ahead and just make this bigger for a second so we can kind of split pane this, and you can understand better how this works. So the first one we have is the AWS region. So we're going to go to the providers file here. And then as you can see, we have the region of US East 1 hard-coded here. We're going to go ahead and erase that. Now to use the variable, we're going to specify it as var dot, and then you can see because of my plugins for HashiCorp and Terraform, it automatically suggests the AWS region variable, which we have right here. So we'll click that, we'll hit save on that, and then likewise we'll go into the main.tf file and the bucket name. So again, rather than hard coding a bucket name, we're just going to do var.aws bucket name. And then again for the tags, we can just do tags equals var.aws tagging. We'll go ahead and hit save there. Do a Terraform init just to show you. Okay, and go ahead and do a Terraform plan. Okay, we can see that it wants to create a bucket resource. We can see that the tags of environment equals dev, team equals security, that is carried over from our variable of AWS tagging. And then our bucket name, right here, we can see that that's also carried over as well. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to our course here. And finally, we're going to go ahead and create that output file. So basically what's going to happen is once we push out our Terraform code, it's going to output some attributes of our bucket. And we'll see that here in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, output.tf. And then again, we can just go ahead and copy this code. Now, I do have two different ways of doing this. We can do it this way, where we can specify each output that we want to do, give it a description, give it a value, but basically here's each attribute that we want to output, which would be the bucket's ID, the ARN, and then the bucket domain. Now we can do it like this, and this will work fine, and I'll show you this first. So if we go ahead and do a Terraform plan, and we can see I do have a couple errors here. So just a good reminder of why you can't always just copy and paste here. But it's a good example of doing some troubleshooting. So we can see that a manage resource, AWS S3 bucket and bucket-1 has not been declared in the root module. So what does that mean here? If we look here, we're trying to output the bucket ID. The value equals AWS S3 bucket. That should look familiar. And then bucket1-ID. So again, let me full screen this. Bring this over here. And we'll go into our main file. So we want to output the bucket ID from this resource. And this resource type here is a S3 bucket. Okay, so we've specified AWS S3 bucket. So this bucket1 right here, it's not able to find that. We have bucket1 here, but here is the typo. So I did bucket_1, and then over here I did bucket-1. So because this is best practice to use underscores in the resource name here, or the reference name, I'm going to go ahead and update that over here. So I'm going to do a Command-Shift-H here, which will allow me to search for bucket-1, which we can see there's 3 in my output file, which is right here, and we're going to replace it with buckets_1. So the red is what it was previously, crossed out. The green is what we're changing it to. I'm okay with all these, so I can click on this button here and replace everything. So now you can go ahead and see that this has all been changed. If we go ahead and do a Terraform plan again, it should work just fine. And we can see exactly. So the reason we did the Terraform plan again, I mean, not only for that troubleshooting lesson, but we can see that it's going to create this bucket, but now we have this new thing we didn't have before, changes to outputs. And this is going to give us a preview of what outputs, what attributes we're going to output. And so in this case, it's the bucket ARN, domain, and ID, which is exactly what we specified here. So if we go ahead and do a Terraform apply here, it's going to go ahead and create this resource after we hit yes, and then it's going to output those attributes. So we can see here is the bucket name, which this will look familiar because this is the name of our variable that we specified for the bucket name. And then the bucket domain, and then the bucket ID, which again is just our bucket name that we specified. And so the reason you would do outputs, I mean, there's a couple of reasons here. You might want to do outputs, and this is not required. As you look at the previous modules that we did, we didn't do outputs, right? So this is kind of a new thing that we're covering. It's completely optional, but if you are running this code and you don't want to have to run into the AWS console to try to identify, in this case, the bucket that we spun up and try to find these attributes, we can just go ahead and output that. So it's convenience for us, but we could also use these outputs for other pieces of Terraform as well when we have more complicated Terraform that we're deploying. Or perhaps maybe we want to run a script after this that references those outputs. So let's go ahead and go into the AWS console, and we can just go ahead and see our bucket. Let me refresh this. It's taken a minute, and I need to sign back in. I signed back into the console. We can go ahead and see the new S3 bucket that we just created, which is right here. We can go ahead and see the tags that we applied. We can see the bucket ARN, which is something that we outputted here. We can see that right here. We can see the bucket ID right up here. And then I believe the domain name is on one of these. Well, I thought it was on one of these tabs, but the domain name is just your bucket name .s3.amazonaws.com. So if we go ahead and go back to the course, I believe we've covered everything here, and we have. So yeah, I mean, this is how we write better Terraform code. You know, we originally had one file that contained everything, and while that does work, it can get messy, especially as we create more and more resources. So splitting our code up into the different files like providers, variables, and output just leads to much cleaner code and gives us a better understanding of the code and what exactly we're doing. So with that being said, that's the end of Module 3. I will have another video here where we cover Module 4, which is going to be working with Terraform state. So we're going to understand and learn how Terraform keeps track of resources and changes of those resources. So that'll be a good lesson to cover that understanding, and I look forward to the next module with you.